Ladies and gentlemen, an Allahabad High Court judge, while attending a VHP meeting, has said this is Hindustan. The country will function according to majority's wishes. The law operates in accordance with majority. Only what ensures welfare of majority will be accepted. Hindus should not be considered cowards. If this spirit dies, we become like Taliban. UCC, that's the Uniform Civil Code, promotes social harmony and equality. Cut mullahs are creating division in the society. Words of Justice Shekhar Yadav at a VHP program on the Uniform Civil Code, as reported across publications including Live Law and Bar and Bench. There's a furore over his statements, with Kapil Sibal, MP and the President for the Supreme Court Bar Association calling it a hate speech, seeking for his impeachment or removal. He has said, how is such a judge appointed? How do people have courage to speak like this? This is breaking India. Politicians don't even say such things. These words do not befit a judge. Seeking for strict action from the Supreme Court. And by the way, the Supreme Court has now sought for a report from the Allahabad High Court. Is this an isolated case? This is not the first time the judge has attracted public scrutiny. According to Indian Express, in September 2021, while rejecting the bail petition of a man booked under the UP Prevention of Cow Slaughter Act 1955, Justice Yadav had urged the centre to declare cow as a national animal, to introduce a bill in the parliament for cow protection and recognize cow protection as a fundamental right of Hindus. In October 2021, while granting bail to an accused, he had observed that Parliament should pass a law to honour Hindu deities. So where does one draw the line, particularly as a judge, between the personal and professional? Is justice a victim when it's a mindset, or as many are saying, a fringe language at the forefront? An unapologetic VHP chief, Alok Kumar, has told PTI that they had invited the judge as a faculty to speak on the Uniform Civil Code. We work among former judges, invite them to work for the VHP for the Hindutva. In this case, it's a sitting judge. And sometimes we call them for issues that require awareness and understanding. I'm being joined at this point by Karti Chidambaram, who is a Congress MP. Very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My first question, how do you look at the statements which have been made by this judge of Allahabad High Court, and the words used by him at the VHP event?
It's very, very worrying, and it's of great concern to me that a sitting justice of a high court would give such, sectarian views in a judge who's supposed to uphold the Constitution, a judge who's supposed to be very measured in their public utterances, they had no compunction in giving such a sectarian, divisive, I would say even communal views, and which now has been universally condemned. And the Bar Association, the Supreme Court Bar Association, everybody has condemned it. And I also read that the Supreme Court has taken suo motu notice of it. And I hope they censure or even take much more severe action against the said judge.
So where should anybody holding a constitutional position draw a line? Anybody who's at a position such as a judge draw the line? How is it defined?
See, I think judges must be very circumspect. They must choose very carefully the events they attend, the platforms they use, and the words they choose to use. I think judges can't behave as freely as every other citizen in this country. Judges need to have a code of conduct which restricts them from many platforms and from airing their views, however, whatever they might be. And first of all, it's worrying that a sitting judge has these views, and it's doubly worrying that he airs them so freely. So yes, judges need to have a code of conduct, and I'm sure there is a code of conduct. And I would not say that most judges behave like this. This is an exception rather than the rule. So most judges do adhere to that code of conduct, which applies to them.
That's interesting to hear from you, but going forward, how are you looking at this in the sense that we have Owaisi who has filed a petition signature of 100 MPs that has been sought for. You've had Kapil Sibal who has said that he's going to be moving a motion for impeachment. How do you see this proceed?
There have been other instances in the past. There have also been instances where judges have gone on to take political roles immediately after their retirement. That also is very worrying. And I really think that it's really incumbent upon the Supreme Court to lay down the code of conduct for judges and for a code of conduct for them immediately after they demit office. It's really it's up to the Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court will act, especially on this instance, because there's been such widespread condemnation of his conduct.
Supreme Court has, of course, sought for a report on in this case, Mr. Karti Chidambaram, but also a larger concern. How closely do you look at the report that has been sought? Is it a welcome move? Is it an important move? Or is it rather in the lines of placating?
No, I think the Supreme Court will act on this regard, and I think this is not something which they can just brush under the carpet. And while they have taken notice of it, I mean, I think they have to follow some due process, and they will follow due process and will act. I'll be very, very surprised if the Supreme Court sort of just goes through the motions and lets things be as they are. I think they will act on this instance. I think it'll be very, very difficult for them not to act on this instance.
Mr. Karti Chidambaram, my last question to you. Do you really see this issue as a communal issue alone? Is this particularly targeting one community, or are there overarching concerns in this?
I think he's completely out of line. Somebody who's supposed to uphold the rule of law and to abide by the Constitution, I think he's either completely misguided or misunderstood the Constitution, and his personal views, obviously these are his personal views, are very, very poisonous. And it's very worrying that somebody who's holding such a high position has such views. And I think Mr. Kapil Sibal is right when he says that this judge must be impeached. And it's really incumbent upon the Supreme Court to act. And I really think the ball is in their court to set the tone, to send a message, and everything else. There no other institution can really act on this other than the Supreme Court.
Right. Mr. Karti Chidambaram, thank you very much for joining us and for your time. I'm also being joined at this point by Sanjay Hegde, who's a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, as well as Shashank Shekhar Jha, who's a lawyer with the Supreme Court. Thank you very much, both of you. Very good evening. My first question, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, how does one draw the line between what is personal and professional? Because some may argue that, listen, people from all kinds of stature, all backgrounds, they attend different meetings, whether they're politically aligned, whether religiously aligned, whether they're socially aligned. That's their freedom, that's their fundamental right. But here, is it about the event that he was attending? Or rather, is it about a psyche, a mindset that was reflected?
Well, most importantly, what has been lost is the perception of impartiality. Tomorrow, if a litigant who did not belong to the Hindu community were to tell him that, look, you cannot do justice because these are your stated views in public, then he would of necessity have to recuse himself, or a superior court may be forced to do so. There is something called the Restatement of Values of Judicial Life, which was adopted by the full court meeting of the Supreme Court on 7th of May, 1997. The first statement out there is, justice must not merely be done, but it must also be seen to be done. The behavior and conduct of members of the higher judiciary must reaffirm the people's faith in the impartiality of the judiciary. Accordingly, any act of a judge of the Supreme Court or a High Court, whether in official or personal capacity, which erodes the credibility of this perception, has to be avoided. Is in breach directly. Then there are other provisions also. A judge should practice a degree of aloofness consistent with the dignity of his office. A judge shall not enter into public debate or express his views in public on political matters or on matters that are pending or likely to arise for judicial determination. Well, this declaration has been in existence for nearly 3 decades now. All judges of the higher judiciary know about it and they're bound to follow it. You can't simply lay it by the wayside, and it's not about X function or Y function. What he said out there was unacceptable. It showed a deep bias, and for some things much less in other countries, people have lost their jobs. One of the greatest of judges in post-World War England was Lord Denning, and he wrote something in a book which was seen as being controversial and with regard to Asians. He said they are white, black colored and brown. Some of them come from countries where bribery and graft are accepted and where stealing is a virtue so long as you are not found out. They no longer share the same code of morals or religious beliefs. When this came out in a book, Lord Denning later had to apologize and he had to be persuaded to retire from the bench. Any civilized society requires both impartiality and aloofness from its judges. Judges, it is said, have to be prepared to live like a hermit and work like a horse.
Right.
Here, I think this particular judge has been off-key.
Shashank Shekhar Jha, how do you look at this? We just heard Mr. Sanjay Hegde speak, but how do you look at this? Do you believe that with what the judge spoke, where he spoke, and the words he used, compromised the perception of impartiality and showcased a deep-seated bias?
Namaste, Sneha ji and my fellow panelists here. Sneha ji, first of all, this is the hypocrisy of not only senior advocate Sanjay Hegde ji, but a lot of people who otherwise advocate for freedom of speech and expression by anyone and everyone. But when someone literally speaks his heart out, when he was not on his professional duty, but at a public functioning, they criticize him for no reason. Now, for that matter of fact, we have seen those days when Indira Gandhi-led government has refused to make Justice Hegde of that point as Chief Justice of India and have made someone junior to him as Chief Justice. So was that not infringement of judiciary? Indira Gandhi later on again did the same with another justice just few years later. So these were the situations. Now during Congress time, just give me seconds. During Congress time,
Shashank Shekhar Jha, I do not intend to interrupt, and I have to come back to you. You will get the right to respond because obviously I was with Mr. Sanjay Hegde for a longer period. But Shashank Shekhar Jha, I do not think the parallels that you are drawing, particularly with how someone was appointed and someone was not, is anywhere close to how and what we really are discussing. It would be very important that we stick to the point of what we are discussing and not really banter around the bush to be able to lose the essence of what we are speaking. So please go ahead, sir.
So Sneha, I was just giving you parallel examples, and I will give you just 3 more examples. The other example I was just quoting was, Mr. Zakir Naik, who is a so-called terrorist, was invited to IS/IPS Academy by then Congress government. Now another example, there were appointments done by Congress government making these people saying, no. Just understand that when Prime Minister met Chief Justice of India on the occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi, there was controversy. But then previously we have seen how Chief Justice of India used to do iftar parties at Presidential House. So these were some examples. Now this particular judge who is in question, what did he say in that Pangli functioning? He made certain comments which is otherwise saying, majority should be followed. There should be no discrimination among people. Is halala or for that one triple talaq not unconstitutional? So I don't think, and they are being challenged before Supreme Court, different courts. But my point is that when you are on a particular position, you do have your own opinion. You cannot be stopped from speaking out. And the example is led by Chief Justice of India. We have seen how Chief Justice of India, the previous former Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, he used to regularly appear before different press conferences and interviews, and he used to speak his heart out. And there were instances where public functionaries, be it Prime Minister, President of India, Chief Justice, governors, then why not the judges of high courts? If they have to speak something when they were not sitting on a particular position or chair, I don't find it any problematic. The difficulty here is that if and why I quoted those examples. If you are attending some event or some seminar which is say funded by some international organization, you are fine with it. But if the same thing is done by Vishwa Hindu Parishad, you have a problem. And then you try to impeach him. And this is not the first time, Snehaji, that we have seen something similar in past 10 years. Just 1 second. Kapil Sibal, who is making this big noise today.
That's a point. I'll come to that point. This is definitely not the first time. This is not definitely not the first time, but allow me to keep that for another point before I come back to you. Just a minute. Shashank Shekhar Jha. Now, you said that where is the freedom of this? We'll come back to that point. I also have the same thing to say. This is not the first point, but to both of you, Mr. Shashank Shekhar Jha, you are bringing in freedom of expression. Firstly, you brought in what the Congress government did, blah, blah, blah. I'm not interested in that. We will get to that in another discussion on another platform, what the Congress government has done, what the BJP government has done. Then, as I said, that's not the part of our discussion. We are sticking to something very particular. Now, what has he said? Let me read that out. This is Hindustan. Country will function according to majority's wishes. The law operates in accordance with majority. Only what ensures welfare of majority will be accepted. Cut mullahs are creating division in society. Now, listen, here's my question. I haven't heard this, but credible outlets like Bar and Bench, Live Law, as well as Kapil Sibal have gone on record to make these statements at different places. Is this free speech according to your legal interpretation, Shashank Shekhar Jha? 2 minutes to you before I go to Mr. Sanjay Hegde.
Democracy functions as to who gets the majority vote. So he said something what normal people say. If you vote to a majority, how government functions. Someone who gets the majority vote in a particular society do rule and make laws for the society. So suppose this particular judge is saying that country will
for
run
the majority society or for India.
Yeah, majority opinion. Majority community, majority opinion, whatever you say. So suppose if a country wants to run through a secular fabric, and if suppose someone is coming up with a communal line, it will not function. It will run through secular fabric. India has been known to be a secular fabric. So I'm just making a point that we need to not go to that level where we are trying to peel off something which is not there. Whatever he said is in a very general context. That country will have to run through the opinion of majority. It is not a court of law where he was talking. He was referring to normal people, and I don't think that it is for the first time when someone sitting on a particular position is making some statement. Now, merely because he said something at a Vishwa Hindu Parishad organization held event, now they are making this a big hue and cry. So I don't find it having some merit.
Sanjay Hegde, if I can get you in. Sanjay Hegde, freedom to express, free speech, even a journalist like me would know, is subject to reasonable restrictions. But how would you argue to what Shashank Shekhar Jha has said? And many others are arguing, listen, he's just spoken his mind. It's free speech. So how do you differentiate between free speech and hate speech? What if some minority community goes and speaks something to somebody against making some statement against the whole majority community? Aren't we then just heading downhill?
Let's assume that the judge was from a minority community. He went to a religious function or to a political function of his community. for purposes like, let's have a Sikh judge from Punjab addressing a Sammelan, some guru's martyrdom day at a Gurdwara, saying that, Raj karega Khalsa or rahega na koi, or something of that kind. Would that be acceptable? See, the point is advocating supremacy of one community or one religion over another, and reverting back to the same judicial guidelines. The judges themselves decided it, and they said a judge is expected to let his judgment speak for themselves. He shall not give interviews to the media. This was way back before you had 24/7 media, before you had social media and everything. Now we all live in this goldfish bowl, and we know that whatever we say is propagated instantly. It's not only the freedom of speech, it's the freedom of reach. Whatever you say is clipped into capsule-sized content and spread across by IT cells all over on WhatsApp and things like that. So you must, if you are to be a judge, consistent with the dignity of your office, be aloof in your public dealing, and be restrained in your comment. Otherwise, it may well be that some member of the public may say, the judge says so, I can say much worse. This has brought down the image of the judiciary. And if the judiciary does not take a call, and by the judiciary, I do not mean the bench alone, the bar as well, because it is from the bar that all these judges come. We have to take a call that we will be restrained in our speech. In fact, one of the greatest principles of advocacy is not what you say, it is what you do not say. You can say, if you are only going to say whatever comes to the top of your head, then you are not doing service to the profession of the law or to the role of a judge.
Okay. If I can just get in Shashank Shekhar Jha to respond. And Mr. Shashank Shekhar Jha, you were also raising the point about how this is not the first time that something like this has happened. In fact, if you look at the earlier versions of, some remarks made by Justice Yadav himself, and I'm quoting the Indian Express on it, he in September 2021, October 2021, he spoke about how Parliament should pass a law to honor Hindu deities. In September 2021, sought cow protection for Hindus as fundamental right, and he went on to make other statements as well. In isolation, it's up for debate whether he's in the right side or the wrong, so whether it is the right interpretation of the laws. But when you look at it with what was spoken at the VHP event, is that still justifiable? Free speech, I doubt whether there is any platform to really look at this with.
Nehaji, I guess we are, honestly trying to target Mr. Justice Yadav. Everyone has their own point of view, and yes, it is often cited that justice or judges do not often speak in public forum other than through their judicial remark. However, I don't think there is any wrong in quoting something or expressing their opinion openly. There are many judges who do it after retirement. Justice Yadav has that audacity or that courage to do it while he is sitting on the chair. So Mr. Hegde was talking about, some minority judge to come in public and say. So there is Justice Nariman, wrong tongue, who after retirement is continuously speaking on the Ram Mandir issue and etc. So I would say that opposition is continuously trying to target judiciary through different means. They did it with CGI Justice Mishra. Now they are trying to do it with Justice Yadav. They tried to impeach Mishra ji. They are trying to impeach Yadav ji because these judges do not go with dictates of those who are unelected. They are trying to put off their own point of view. I don't find it any problematic. Now, when a sitting lawyer can become a sitting Rajya Sabha MP and then he can speak his mind out, why not a sitting judge can go to a public forum and express his opinions? And as far as undermining the authority of the constitution of our judiciary, the authority or the status of judiciary was undermined when Supreme Court was opened at 3 midnight to safeguard some rapist or someone, not when Justice Yadav is saying something openly in a public forum as far as not disturbing the communal harmony. So I don't find it worthy enough for a debate per se. But I really feel a pity that opposition is making a big issue out of nothing.
Okay, Sanjay Hegde, and I just want to move the focus a little bit to a larger issue as well, Sanjay Hegde. Of course, you will have the right to respond as well. But let me ask this as well. Look at some judges, what the words that they use inside their courtrooms are hugely important as well as outside. But just look at some very sweeping statements that judges have used in the past. And I'm just giving you some examples. For example, reservation is a form of social injustice. All women suffer in marriages, or women suffer in all marriages. My unmarried daughters are my liabilities. These are some statements that have been made. Of course, the contexts are different, varied whatsoever. Again, the same question. One is a judge. One has a propriety. One has the oath that one has taken for whatever reasons. But where does one draw the line, and how is one held accountable?
Well, accountability is a different thing. We have insulated our judges against being answerable to anyone except to a parliamentary impeachment. And that is why the parliamentary impeachment, even if it does not go through, sometimes acts as a check on judges' propensities. I would very much doubt that if in the 2 remaining years of Mr. Yadav's career as a judge, if it continues that long, he will indulge in anything like this again. I would fully expect that the Supreme Court would advise him correctly to withdraw all that has been said and to apologize to those who have been hurt, and hopefully recover some element of the impartiality that judges are supposed to maintain. When we speak of freedom of speech, you said that there are reasonable restrictions, but the life of a judge is very restricted. The very nature of the job restricts him. I know of judges who have been my friends who we will not talk to each other as long as they are sitting in the office. At best, it is just hello, how are you, when you meet at social functions. Judges, that is why they say, almost live a monkish existence. That is part of the job requirement, and that is what enables the public to have a perception of impartiality. If you gambol in public the way you are doing and say anything that comes to the top of your mind, then you do not fit that high office to which the people of this country have placed you in. It is best that people like this, if they feel that judicial discipline is not part of their job function, then they should go out, be free men, advocate their views politically, do what they want, exercise free speech. But as a judge, you have to be above suspicion at all times.
Shashank Shekhar Jha, please respond. And the same question to you, Mr. Shashank Shekhar Jha. I mean, I just listed out several orders that have been quite sweeping. Some may call it extreme, some may call it politically placating, some may call it misogynist. And there are various such orders, various such remarks in the, whether it be in High Court or lower courts, much lesser in Supreme Court, but nonetheless. Mr. Shashank Shekhar Jha, where does one draw the line? If one justifies everything, then everything just comes under the freedom of speech. Then where does justice really, which court does justice knock for?
Sneha ji, there was a time, a year back or two, when some judge, while sitting on his bench at Supreme Court, said something, and a big mob in different cities were after Nupur Sharma, demanding her head, and that poor girl is still behind, her closed doors. So we have seen that situation. Now, in this particular situation, Mr. Yadav has not said something which is such objectionable in nature. He's just said that a country will run by the wishes of the majority, and this is a fact. You like it or not,
So
every country
if
has
the
the same.
example by which you have given, where does one draw the line? I mean, it can't be case to case. There has to be a way of how judges are perceived and how they
Exactly.
perceive
This is
themselves and how they
yes.
perceive public interaction. You cited an example, and I totally am against it in the sense that no judge has the right to speak the way that would incite people. However, if one is wrong, the other cannot be right or cannot be justified.
Snehaji, so in the case of Mr. Yadav, you have not seen people coming on road and actually asking for head. While on the other case, you have seen those situation. So if you want to cherry pick some situation like how opposition is doing, I would suggest them to do in every case, because otherwise they will keep losing the elections. What Justice Yadav has said is something very particular. He said that this country will not have a situation where you can give triple talaq to anyone. What wrong does he say? Even parliament says so, even ruling government says so, multiple Supreme Court judgments has said so. He said that this country cannot have someone who will marry 4 times. Even Supreme Court judgment says so. So I don't find anything wrong in that. You may have an objection with the way it has been said. However, in the division bench judgment of Kunal Kamra by Maharashtra High Court, they said that even if something which you find insulting or which you may find not very lucrative in nature cannot be justified, being targeted while, calling it fake news, misleading, or say whatsoever. So I would say Article 21, that is right to life, and Article 19, that is freedom of speech and expression, lies with everyone, including Justice Yadav, and he has every right to say whatever he want to, until unless it is hurting someone, like whatever happened with Nupur Sharma.
All right. Okay, Sanjay Hegde as well as Shashank Shekhar Jha, thank you very much for joining us. A very, very sensitive issue that we have been discussing. And one thing that everybody would agree is Article 21 as well as Article 19. Article 21 is a fundamental right to life, and Article 19, that's a freedom, or the freedoms to express being one of them, is nothing but with reasonable restrictions. And where does reasonable restrictions draw a line when it comes to a judge or anybody else who holds a constitutional position with respect to the democracy of India? That's a question that we'll be looking at Supreme Court even as a report is sought for. Sanjay Hegde as well as Shashank Shekhar Jha, thank you very much for your time. Well, it's time for a very short break. On the other side, news and updates.